Professional recordings going on there. Are you going to wait till it comes? You're going to wait till it comes and it goes in there?
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janaballabha Giridvaradhari Gopi Janaballabha Giridvaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Gopi Janaballabha Giridvaradhari Jai Gopi Janaballabha Giridvaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Shivam Sabiraj Jai Stoter Sata Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Om Shivam Sabiraj Jai Stoter Sata Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarati Thakur Prabhupada ki Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 29. Explanation of devotional service by Lord Kapila. Text 1 and 2. We will chant text 1. Devahuti-uvacha Lakshanam Maharadinam Prakrite Purusasya Cha Sarupam Lakshate Misham Yena Tat Paramartikam Lakshanam Maharadinam Prakrite Purusasya Cha Sarupam Lakshate Misham Yena Tat Paramartikam Lakshanam Maharadinam Prakrite Purusasya Cha Sarupam Lakshate Misham Yena Tat Paramartikam Vaishnavis. Devahuti-uvacha. Devahuti said. Lakshanam, symptoms. Mahadadinam, of the Mahat Tattva, and so on. Prakriti, of material nature. Purushasya, of the spirit. Cha, and Sarupam, the nature. Lakshate is described. Amisham, of those. Yena, by which. Tatparama artikam, the true nature of them. And we have the next verse. Yatha sankyeshu katitam yan mulam tat prachakshate bhakti yogasya me margam bruhi vistarasha prabho. Yatha, as. Sankyeshu, in Sankhya philosophy. Katitam is explained. Yat, of which. Mulam, ultimate end. Tat, that. Prachakshate, they call. Bhakti yogasya, of devotional service. Me, to me. Margam, the path. Bruhi, please explain. Vistarasha, at length. Prabhu, my dear Lord Kapila. Devahuti inquired, my dear Lord, you have already very scientifically described the symptoms of the total material nature and the characteristics of the spirit, according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now I shall request you to explain the path of devotional service, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical systems. Purport. In this 29th chapter, the glories of devotional service are elaborately explained, and the influence of time on the conditioned soul is also described. The purpose of elaborately describing the influence of time is to detach the conditioned soul from his material activities, which are considered to be simply a waste of time. In the previous chapter, material nature, the spirit, and the Supreme Lord, or Supersoul, are analytically studied. And in this chapter, the principles of Bhakti Yoga, or devotional service, the execution of activities in the eternal relationship between the living entities and the personality of Godhead are explained. Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the basic principle of all systems of philosophy. All philosophy which does not aim for devotional service to the Lord is considered merely mental speculation. But of course, Bhakti Yoga with no philosophical basis is more or less sentiment. There are two classes of men. Some consider themselves intellectually advanced and simply speculate and meditate, and others are sentimental and have no philosophical basis for their propositions. Neither of these can achieve the highest goal of life, or if they do, it'll take them many, many years. Vedic literature, therefore, suggests that there are three elements, namely the Supreme Lord, the living entity, and their eternal relationship. And the goal of life is to follow the principles of bhakti, or devotional service, and ultimately attain to the planet of the Supreme Lord in full devotion and love as an eternal servitor of the Lord. Sankhya philosophy is the analytical study of all existence. One has to understand everything by examining its nature and characteristics. This is called acquirement of knowledge. But one should not simply acquire knowledge without reaching the goal of life, or the basic principle for acquiring knowledge, Bhakti Yoga. If we give up Bhakti Yoga, and simply busy ourselves in the analytical study of the nature of things as they are, then the result will be practically nil. It is stated in the Bhagavatam that such engagement is something like husking a paddy. There's no use beating the husk if the grain has already been removed. By the scientific study of material nature, the living entity, and the supersoul, one has to understand the basic principle of devotional service to the Lord. Translation again. Devahuti inquired, "My dear Lord, you have already very scientifically described the symptoms of the total material nature and the characteristics of the spirit according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now I shall request you to explain the path of devotional service, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical systems." Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasani Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Devahuti, the mother of Lord Kapiladeva. Of course, the Lord needs no parents. But because some devotees want to serve him in that way, he accepts such relationships. There is a kind of original attractiveness to bodily relationships and kinship. That's why in the topmost portion of the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna has family, because there is a special flavor. This is my auntie, this is my uncle, so on and so forth. Krishna has aunties and uncles, of course, on both sides. Mother Yashoda, and then Nanda Maharaj. This is the spiritual world. There are no material bodies. Everyone has a spiritual form. But the kinship attractiveness originates there because there is some kind of original affinity. You might say Adi buzz, original buzz. But when that reflects in the material world, things get problematic. So because some devotees want to serve him in that way, to be in that kind of relationship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has parents, although he's the cause of all causes, and everything emanates from him. So Devahuti has that role as the mother of Lord Kapiladeva. Kardama Muni, the father, has left home, as he promised to do. He would give her some children, and then he would depart. Lord Kapiladeva has already explained about bhakti earlier in this canto. You may remember chapter 25, the glories of devotional service. But what's wrong with going deeper? Do you ever get to the bottom of bhakti? No. When it comes to real love, you can never get to the bottom. When it comes to the so-called love that's reflected in this material world, there's always a bottom, as you may find out. Relationships in bhakti are all about inspiring one another how to advance in Krishna's service. And that is the basis and foundation of real love. Duty and commitment in the relationships in this world for achieving the goal of pleasing Krishna. Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna. When relationships have that as the center, then we can start to perceive What is real love? Real love is always directly in relationship to Krishna. We are not shunyavadis, making everything zero. I was listening to Prabhupada describe, he was talking to a news reporter in Melbourne. Maybe Jai Srila Prabhu and Bimala Mataji were there at the time. 1976, were you there? So it was a lady reporter, and she wanted to stir things up, you know. She wanted some sparks to fly so she could have something to go back to her superiors with at the network and the radio station, and they would be able to agitate the public with something sensational. So she was pushing Prabhupada. So what were you in your normal life? I've heard you were a businessman. That's the lead-up question. And Prabhupada explained that, yes, that's true. I had a family, I was doing business, but on the order of my spiritual master, I'm doing what I'm doing now. What about those books? Why, if you're spiritual people, in other words, why don't you just give the books away? Because they're spiritual, and you say you want to educate the people, why not just give them away? And Prabhupada explained that, well, we have to pay for the printing of the books, and we have our mission. All right, if you can't give them away, why not a cheaper price? As if she knows the price. I see here you have, opulent building. I think at that time, Albert Park wasn't so upscale as it is now. Was that so? But now it's just through the roof. Doctors, lawyers. So she kept bringing that point up. That, well, okay, you're spiritual. On the order of your guru, you renounced everything and spread this cult all over the world. But you've got so much stuff here, buildings and books and young people. So Prabhupada explained to her that our philosophy is not to make everything zero. She had that notion. I thought it was very ingenious how Prabhupada latched on to that misconception buried deep in her little mind. And of course, he was instructing his disciples. We are not shunyavadis. Spiritual doesn't mean have nothing. Spiritual means use everything you have for Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's service. The only difference between spirit and matter is the use in Krishna's service. That is what makes the distinction. So later, after she left to his disciples, he explained more that there's this misconception that true spirituality means nothing. You have nothing. We say no, on the authority of Rupa Goswami. True spirituality means whatever is within your scope of being able to offer, you offer it for Krishna's pleasure. That is genuine spiritual life. Remember the example of Prabhupada's servants showing him a picture of a popular yogi at the time? India always goes through these phases of this Baba or this yogi or this Nityananda or that Ananda, and they become popular for some time and then they fade, and the public gets on to them. So the devotees showed Prabhupada a picture of a popular yogi of the 70s, and he was sitting next to some gold bars, and he was like this. And of course, the ordinary people in India thought, oh, how holy, how pure. But Prabhupada said they should take a picture of us with the bars of gold, and we'll be not for us, but for Krishna. So bhakti requires some understanding, scientific understanding, tattva. We are not sentimentalists. As you heard in the purport, that bhakti yoga with no philosophical basis is more or less sentiment. Sentiment is something. Maybe you've attended or seen on television or something various religious events, and the minister, the pastor, at one of these kind of spontaneous congregations. Tell me, do you love the Lord? Raise your hand if you love the Lord. Say it, please. Say it. I love the Lord. That's nice. I mean, you have to begin somewhere. Yes, you've seen those kind of, you're aware of those kind of, do you love the Lord? Do you love the Lord? And raise your hand. There's bhakti there, but it has a very weak foundation, and therefore its growth will be very subject to the influences of material nature. And then you have the mental speculators. Those you who are older may remember the Vedanta Society, and what was another one? Theosophical Society, and the others. Very elderly people who would just get together and discuss the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra and just speculate together using translations, of course, and commentaries that were totally speculative. And then you have your tea and your watercress sandwiches and true British style. Reminds me of during my university days, they had the Shakespearean Club. And of course, this was the late 60s, early 70s when all the students were radical and counter this and counter that. So we used to make fun of those, stuffy, Britishy type students who would be members of the Shakespearean Club. And they would indeed serve tea and watercress sandwiches. I don't know if you even know what watercress is. Does anyone know it? It's some kind of exotic green. You know what, Stomach Bob, you know what watercress is? Did your family serve it? It's considered aristocratic. Wales, you wouldn't know about it. So some people are attracted to metaphysical speculation, even in this day and age of complete sensuality and overindulgence. There are some persons who, even today, you still have, it's gradually fading, but what is it, the School of Philosophy? Here in New Zealand and other places, England, and they attract people. Don't you want to understand philosophy? Our Himran Krishna, he was, involved with that to a certain degree. The basis of it all is just Sankhya, Mayavad. They actually have schools, at least 10 years ago they did. They teach their kids Sanskrit. So they train their kids from an early age in impersonalism, in Mayavad. I remember one of their persons who had grown up in this from birth, just like you have there, Balai. Are you listening, Balai? Okay, thank you. So kids like him growing up, weaned on Mayavad, it's hard for you to believe, isn't it? Weaned on mental speculation. So one of them, by the time she was 18 or 19, she came to one of my workshops at the Bhakti Lounge. And we were reading and speaking about Bhagavad Gita. The seminar was called Gita Mysteries. And so she brought up the point, like, well, what is this? What is all this talk about the distinction between the jiva and Vishnu? She had some so-called Vedic knowledge. Actually, any talk about distinction is just an illusion. There's simply non-duality. So after everyone left, because I didn't want to, the rest of the people were not mental speculators. They were just typical Kiwi apatheists. A combination of apathy and theism. You know the definition I've told you? What is apatheism? God, souls, never think about it. It's apatheism. Neither for nor against. I mean, what's the thought got to do with me? So most of the audience was like that, apatheists. So I talked to her more afterwards, after everyone left. And I said, well, you feel that you have studied Bhagavad Gita? Of course, since I was 5 years old, I know the Sanskrit. I mean, it's quite something, an 18-year-old, knows Sanskrit. But if you learn something since you were 5, you obviously have retained something. So I told her, turn to this page where the verse, Tvevaham Jatunasam is. Never was there a time when I was not an individual. Never was there a time when Arjuna, you were not an individual. It's not happening now, and it won't happen in the future. So it's a very lengthy purport. And for someone who thinks that everything is just non-duality, it's a devastating purport. So I said, well, please read this purport. Oh, sure. So she started reading, and sentence after sentence, what she was thinking was being totally dismantled. She got halfway through and started shaking. And then she couldn't go any further. She just shut the book. Because she had been raised since birth in mental speculation. This is why Mahaprabhu says, hearing Mayavad philosophy will doom you, because it predisposes you to be anti-devotional service. Why should I do devotional service? I am it, and we are it, and I've given you the example before when I was in Jagannath Puri for the Rath Yatra. And actually I was seated there with His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj. We were in some stands, some seats on the upper level of a shop, and we were looking down at the Rath carts, watching as Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra were brought onto the carts. And so then, after their lordships were on the carts, the head of the Shankaracharya Math, ceremonially, every year he would make some offering on each cart. So he did that. He walked up the steps on each cart and did some puja. And because I was watching with His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj from a higher vantage point, we could see his countenance, his expression. And it was just as you could predict. I'm offering to me. He's standing before Jagannath. You and I are one, and Om Namo Narayanaya. I am Narayan. I offer to myself, because any duality is just imagination. And then he kind of looked up, and into the stands. I guess you call it a balcony. And he saw some saffron. He saw His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj and myself. And he kind of like smiled, like, oh, some saffronites. And I saw Bhakti True Maharaj tense up, and it's very rare to get that kind of reaction from him towards anyone. But he obviously didn't want to exchange personal cordialities with such an anti-Krishna person. Anti-Krishna, using the Vedas to attack Krishna. Krishna's imaginary. Here's how they say it. He is the foremost representation of Sattva Guna. He is the highest emblem of material representation. Of course, this is complete offense. Krishna has nothing to do with the material energy. And then they have their mythological phrase, beyond Krishna, which, as I often explain, it means complete gibberish. It's as if a Chuta Baba's daughter would say some, I don't know if she still does baby talk. As if she starts talking about the cosmos and the origin of the cosmos. Who's going to take it seriously? So similarly, as soon as you say beyond Krishna, you're speaking gibberish. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Aham sarvastra prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate. I'm the origin of everything material and spiritual. There's nothing beyond me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So, believe it or not, there are some persons, they're few, but they are very attached to mental speculation. In the classic Vedic sense, there are very few. You'll find them in India, and you'll find a few westernized representatives of metaphysical speculation. And then you'll have just out-and-out Kali Yuga rascals with no Vedic trimmings. Like, why do you need the truth to be resolved in one package? When will you grow up and understand that there could be many truths? Why are you so insecure that you need one packet of truth which you embrace as the all in all? I mean, get real. Why are you so juvenile? You're like those little kids there. Why just Krishna, Krishna? Why not this speculation, that speculation? Why not no speculation, just out and out indulgence? Why do you feel the need to resolve the greatest mysteries of life, of the cosmos, into one package known as Krishna? This is so envious, isn't it? Why not just accept life as it is? Accept life with its wonderful delights, accept life with its tragic occurrences. Just face it, like that. There's no need to resort to a god, especially a little blue boy. So this is the Kali Yuga degraded version of mental speculation. Both have the same problem. It's actually envy of Krishna. We need the science of Krishna. And the science of Krishna includes the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity, and the relationship between the two. So those three components are what real knowledge consists of. But as we explained in the beginning, Lord Kapila Deva has already talked about pure bhakti. chapter 25. But you never get enough. You can never talk about pure love enough. He's spoken about yoga, mystic yoga, and how the goal is Paramatma. He's talked about Sankhya, analyzing the material world to find the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the root. He's done that in the chapters right before this one. So that's why Devamrta is saying, you've already very scientifically talked about this and that. Now please explain Bhakti Marg, the path of bhakti, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical systems. Of course, this is third canto of Bhagavatam. There's been so much talk about bhakti previously, but you never get enough. And so, in this chapter, Lord Kapil Deva is going to explain pure bhakti again, and he's also going to explain bhakti that apparently is tainted by impure motivations. So it's not that the bhakti itself has different brands. It's that the practitioner of bhakti can impose material conceptions upon bhakti, although bhakti in of itself is pure. So therefore you'll hear about bhakti influenced by the mode of ignorance. That means someone who has their bhakti entangled with violence and envy and anger. And then you'll hear about bhakti under the influence of the mode of passion, someone who, while performing bhakti, has as their aim, or even partial aim, fame and wealth and material enjoyment. And then you'll hear about bhakti tainted by the mode of goodness. You might say, what's wrong with that? Bhakti tainted by the mode of goodness, as Lord Kapil Deva explains, refers to someone who performs bhakti to end all their karma, to free themselves from the chain of karmic activity. So Lord Kapil Deva will explain that. But as we said, bhakti in of itself is pure, but the practitioners bring various conceptions, misconceptions to the table, so to speak. She's also going to ask him to talk about time. And within the subject of time is hearing about samsara, the continual process of birth and death. And her point, as she presents to Lord Kapil Deva, is that by hearing about such calamities, but do people today consider birth and death and time as a calamity? No, it's just something that happens. Like I was hearing Srila Prabhupada talking to this lady reporter in Melbourne, and she was presenting herself that, I'm perfectly happy. And Prabhupada was pushing on her. How can you be perfectly happy when you're going to get old, you're going to die? Oh, no, that's all right. I'm perfectly happy. And so Prabhupada kept making the point that as long as you're subject to birth, death, disease, and old age, how can you say you're happy? But of course, we can see her point of view, right? Hey, okay, birth, death, disease, old age, it's going on, but meanwhile, we've got some magic moments, Yeah, we've got some good times, We've got some victories, corporate victories, personal victories. Yeah, it's not so bad. Right now, anyway. What more do you want out of life, Find some good drinking buddies and find a partner that lasts a couple of years, and hey, I'm good. So she couldn't swallow it. And Srila Prabhupada wouldn't back off. No, you are not happy. I'm perfectly happy. But you will be old soon. That's all right, so what? And she even said, she was a journalist, she had some smart. She even said that, so what if nature's laws are acting on me? So what? Of course, then the conversation got a bit stern. This is what a dog thinks. Prabhupada was, first of all, much older than her, and so he could take that stern position like a grandfather. This is what a dog thinks. Let nature's laws act upon me. Real human life means to escape the clutches of the laws of nature. So sometimes Prabhupada would explain to us that he's an elderly person. He was like 40 or 50 years our senior. So he said, an old man can get away with this kind of thing. Of course, many of us tried to imitate in our youth, you know. So I've been asked the question by devotees quite often. Let's give some context. Here, Devahuti is asking, describe samsara, describe time. A couple of verses ahead, she's going to say, please also describe time, which is a representation of your form, and by whose influence people in general engage in the performance of pious activities. Different yuga, definitely. You would think, why does it automatically follow that if I'm aware of the influence of time, I'll engage in pious activities? No, what do people today say? If they are aware of the passage of time, most of the time they're too intoxicated to think about that. But if they are aware of the passage of time, what's the next conclusion? The next conclusion is, get it while you can. As I used to say when there were more young people engaged in agricultural activity, make hay while the sun shines. But that metaphor doesn't mean much these days, right? Make hay while the sun shines. What is hay? What does the sunshine have to do with hay? But so that's the attitude. Okay, time, tick-tock, tick-tock. Hey, where's my enjoyment? I've got to enjoy now before it's too late. So Lord Kapila Dev and Devahuti are speaking in a different yuga. So therefore, she's taking it as a given. You'll describe time, and a smart person hearing that will engage in punya, pious activities. So her point is that by talking about time, by talking about samsriti, the repetition of birth and death, samsara, by hearing such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world. Often devotees ask a question, why all this emphasis on birth, death, disease, and old age? Isn't it just better to talk about the bliss and the happiness? But you see, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary that even in the beginning, bhakti has to involve some detachment. You can't just erase that component. We are spirit soul, and so if you understand the ABCs of spiritual life, that we're spirit soul, your next question should be, what does a spirit soul do? And why am I pursuing matter if I'm spirit soul? So you can't get away from it. You don't have to stuff it down people's throats. But the fact is, people need to understand what material nature is all about, what material nature is doing. And by hearing that, they can develop a bit of detachment. And Devahuti knows that. By hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world. So you'll find that Lord Kapila Dev is pleased by her questions, because her questions show compassion. She's asking not simply for herself, but she's asking for countless living entities trapped in material existence. So the purport will explain that because she is compassionate upon others, Lord Kapila Dev will be compassionate upon her. So please remember that. If you want to attract the compassion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, be compassionate upon others. Teach them bhakti, train them in bhakti, counsel them in bhakti, and then Krishna will be compassionate upon you. Because as he says in Bhagavad Gita, no one is more dear, nor will there ever be one more dear. And being compassionate takes perseverance. It's not that people are just going to line up at your door and say, tell me about Krishna. I just want to apply everything in Bhagavad Gita right now. It's just not going to happen. Somehow or other, attract them, and then train them, counsel them, advise them. By hearing about Krishna again and again, by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, they'll start to become detached. It's happened to so many of you. And when they see the qualities of devotees, that impresses them. Well, there are the books, and then there are people trying to live according to the qualities in the books. They're not complete angels all the time, but they're trying to be angels. They're trying to be perfect. That is very rare. So again, referring to this question often comes up. Why do we have to talk about birth, death, disease, and old age? First of all, Krishna talks about it in Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavatam talks about it. Because bhakti involves detachment and attachment. The train of bhakti goes on two rails, jnana and vairagya. Knowledge and detachment. Knowledge of Krishna and Krishna's energies, and detachment from the material energy. And the train is heading toward the destination of pure love of Krishna. So it's always a challenge for doing outreach. How do I bring up the inevitable? That you're not going to be around in this body forever. What are you going to do about that? The way I go about it myself is, especially speaking at universities, is to convince persons not so much that they're going to get old and die and get sick, but I focus on their immediate so-called delights. Because their natural defense is, oh, okay, Swami, so we're going to get old, sick, and die. Yeah, but meanwhile, I got some good plans for this weekend. So then I zero in on their temporary happiness and show them how faulty that is. And that generally, I find, that shakes them up. Because they expect me to just deal with the overall existential picture. and try to convince them how bleak and meaningless it is, but I zero in on the weekend. What you're doing this weekend is empty and meaningless. It won't satisfy you. And then, so it's the same purpose, just tailored for this particular stage of Kali Yuga. The purpose is to produce detachment. So once you create some space between them and their beloved indulgences, you create a gap, then you can start to fill that gap with something else. You can start to fill that gap with activities that will attract Krishna. All right, any questions? Yes.
Approaching the bhakti with different motivation or emotive nature, at what point does it become offensive, and at what point does it actually purify us?
Offenses mean that we're chanting Hare Krishna with offenses, we're performing offenses in deity worship, and we're offending Vaishnavas. Otherwise, we have a process of purification. And purification means that you start off with impurities, and gradually they become cleansed. So you have to start somewhere. Your intent, if you're sincere, and Krishna is in everyone's heart, he knows about your sincerity. If you're sincere, you're trying to get over your faults and become purified of them. So we don't criticize someone who's dirty and who's in the shower. Imagine someone's in the shower taking a bath and you holler through the bathroom door, "You dirty person." The person's in the shower. If the person stays in the shower, the person will become clean. So we have to give devotees a chance to grow. We want to avoid the offenses in chanting. We want to avoid offenses in the deity worship. We want to avoid offending Vaishnavas. Because those offenses will stunt our growth. Yes.
In the translation, it said that bhakti is the end of all philosophical systems. But in the purport, Prabhupada says that Sankhya, if it doesn't end up with bhakti, then it's a waste of time. So, how is it that he's saying it may not end up in bhakti, and also then if Sankhya may not end up in bhakti with love of God, then is it possible that someone's doing bhakti, like you mentioned, may be influenced by the contaminated by the roots and passion, that they might not end up also with actually having bhakti? Is that possible?
It depends on how you refer to bhakti. If you're talking about pure bhakti, the ripe mango, that's one thing, and then there's the unripe mango that's gradually ripening. So, unless someone's making offenses, they'll make progress, even though they have material desires, but the progress will be slow. Just like chanting with offenses makes the progress slow. So yes, you can perform Sankhya without getting to the conclusion. Devahuti's talking about the conclusion. Bhakti Marg, the ultimate end of all philosophical systems, but you may not get to the end. And that's the danger, especially in the age of Kali, of performing Sankhya and mystic yoga without, from the very beginning, focusing on the goal, which is Krishna, you can get lost. So it's possible just to, as stated here, if we give up bhakti yoga and simply busy ourselves in the analytical study of the nature of things as they are, then the result will be practically nil. Just like if I would just spend my time analyzing the political and economic and environmental situation of the world, which was my material background, if I simply just get lost in that, the result will be practically nil. But if I can use it in Krishna's service to bring about a transformation in conditioned souls, and a transformation in myself, then okay. But the goal always has to be there, in your face. Krishna's service, bhakti, seva. The goal is not around the corner. It's right here with you, in front of your face. We want to go deeper into what is love of Krishna. Love of Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. And as we become more immersed in approaching love of Krishna, we start to be able to understand Goloka Vrindavan more, Navadvip Dham more, Mahaprabhu's pastimes, Krishna's pastimes. And at the pinnacle of our development, we start to see our role in those pastimes. So whether we are beginning devotees or senior devotees, we have to have the goal right in front of us as we're climbing towards that goal and going deeper into that goal. Especially for older devotees. All right, we're supposed to know that we're not the body, we're spirit soul. But what does the spirit soul do? What are the possibilities for a spirit soul to relate to Krishna? What could be my possibilities? So always in front of us is this desire to satisfy Krishna and understand ourselves in relation to Krishna. And just like a little child, if you ask Achyuta Baba's daughter, well, what are you going to do when you're 17? Huh? 17? What's that? Can't conceive of it. But she knows she's growing. Maybe you might remember. I remember when I was a little kid, when I was 6 or 7 years old, I couldn't understand why adults don't want to play with toy cars and toy trucks. I thought, what do adults do that's fun? They don't play with toy cars, they don't have a train set, you know. I remember, some of you heard me say before, when I was, maybe 9 years old, I would see couples sitting together on the couch holding hands, you know, relatives. And I would just go up to them and say, why are you together? And they would just laugh and look at me. You'll find out soon. So it's, when you're at the beginning stage, it's hard to understand that one day I'll be concerned with who I am in relation to Krishna's pastimes, who I am in relation to Gaur Hari. So there are various levels of concern about your identity. But from the very beginning, you have Krishna's service in front of your eyes. And that is what resolves everything. You're making progress because Krishna's service is in the forefront of your concentration. How can I please Krishna through what I'm doing? So we are not the religious belief organization. We are the devotional service organization. Don't get trapped into this notion that, well, Jai Prabhus, I believe in Krishna, you believe in Krishna, Hari Bol. Where is the service? It's the service that's the all in all. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna doesn't ask for your belief. He asks that you engage your senses in his service. Yes?
I have a question about leadership. So, in the material world, people cooperate because they have some interest. You know, like money, they'll do what the boss or the leader is saying because they want to get paid. But within the ashram and devotional service society as a whole, then there is no monetary gain. And so, as leaders, how do we inspire people to cooperate? Because I've heard, just for example, one thing that I'm thinking of is how one devotee said to me that they don't feel inspired because they don't feel like the leaders actually care about them. And we're struggling, like, as leaders maybe, we're struggling with our own impurities, and they can see that also, so they're not really inspired.
Cooperation has to have a higher purpose than just the day-to-day. In any kind of relationship, any of the ashrams, unless there's a higher purpose, things get tough. It's the higher purpose that carries you through the ups and downs. So regardless of what ashram you're in, you have to see what's the purpose of all this. Otherwise, you'll just get caught up in the temporary happiness and distress, getting along and not getting along. It's endless. Whether you're in the Brahmacharya ashram or the Grihastha ashram, there are endless dramas. As I often point out, it's just that some dramas are cheaper. I think that's a fair statement. Leela Mai, is that a fair statement? She says, okay. Jai Srila Prabhu's starting to give me the look, like, okay now. Watch it, Swami. All right. You're fortunate to have in this community Jai Srila Prabhu and Vimala Mataji, classic example of first-class grihasthas. So. Every ashram has its dramas, the day-to-day. It's there in the sannyas ashram too. Sometimes brahmacharis think, oh, if I become a sannyasi, then no one will mess with me. I can do whatever I like. Travel where I want to. Get all the maha. Sure, I can get all the maha, but I can't digest it. Devotees look at my diet and they say, wait, there's no sugar, there's no deep fries, there's no this, there's no that. Oh, sure, I can have some maha. I take a tiny, tiny piece. I often describe how, as a young devotee in the New York temple, brand new, we younger devotees couldn't understand why the older devotees wouldn't eat all their halava at breakfast. Because for a time, the Brooklyn Temple in New York was having breakfast every morning of halava, the sweet rice. Probably why we're sick now, but anyway. And then you have a cut orange. No one had any plates. There would be a piece of, you call it wax paper? Yes, that's still around, wax paper? Piece of wax paper on the floor in front of you. No spoons, no plates. And then the server would come by and put a big scoop of halava on your piece of wax paper in front of you. And if they made the halava properly, the butter was just flowing, and there'd be chunks of pineapple and chunks of strawberry in it. So halava was, for us back then, was the be-all and end-all, the sarvakarna karanam. So the trick was to find an older devotee. I would look for Jayadvaita Swami, who was brahmachari back then, because I knew he won't. For some reason, these older devotees, they don't eat all their halava. So I would go sit next to him and, ask some philosophical questions, of course, disguising my real intent. And then, of course, as predicted, the server would come by and put a big scoop of halava on his wax paper, and every morning he would carefully tear his wax paper in half and get somehow or other without, in a very Brahminical way, he would get half of his halava scoop onto the other piece of wax paper. And so then you had to wait, because you didn't want to seem that you were greedy. You would just pretend to be detached. And then you let a minute go by or 2 minutes go by, and then you would say, Prabhu, that halava there, you're not taking that? And the senior devotee would always, oh, it's all right. No. You may take. So then you'd, gorge on your halava and his halava. And then right after that, you're supposed to get in a car and go on Sankirtan, travel to Sankirtan spot, and of course you fall asleep in the car. And back then, they would pile the brahmacharis and the brahmacharis all in the same car. And so there you are in the back seat of the car, and so-and-so Devi Dasi's falling asleep on your shoulder, and you're like, Hare Krishna. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Maharaj, how can we make sure that the goal of Krishna is always in our face, and that we're not elongating our path, or we're not getting sidetracked by other goals?
Be dedicated to the process of hearing and chanting and distributing Krishna's mercy. Then you always have to think how to remain sharp in bhakti, on the bhakti marg. Remember, be compassionate to others and Krishna will be compassionate to you. Yes?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I just want to know if we have to endeavor for bhakti in pure goodness before we can go for pure bhakti. Do we have to experience bhakti in mode of goodness before we can experience?
It can be. It can be. You can start off performing bhakti because you intelligently want to become free from samsara. You want to eradicate your karmic chain. Yes? Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvida bhajanti mam jana sukati na Arjuna. 4 kinds of persons come to me, but they come to me. Therefore, they all have sukriti. They all have auspicious merit. Okay? Yes.
It strikes me your end run around the issue of death, focusing on the weekend at the universities, that there's all this violent iconoclasm that people experienced from the past around the issue of
Are you referring to the Archa Vigraha or just the personality of Godhead?
The actual he is the Archa Vigraha.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I've asked one of my cohorts from the late 70s, since that time, Krishna Kshetra Swami. He did his PhD thesis at Oxford about Murti Seva, deity worship. So for the BBT, I've asked him to write a book, a small book meant for the general educated population, introducing. It's called Krishna's Form, a Guide for the Perplexed. And it deals with just that issue, which I hear all the time from my mother or anyone, you idol worshippers. So yes, he's working on that right now, a small book. Let's see how it turns out. We hope that it'll be something that you can use. Deity worship is very difficult to explain. It's something to be experienced. Otherwise, for a non-adept, for someone who is not in any way doing any bhakti practice, and they're not from India, it's very difficult to just philosophically, theoretically understand. But when they're able, when they've come along in their spiritual development, their elementary spiritual development, when they come and see the deity, something happens. So therefore, it's often not something that you want to get into from the very beginning, and you steer around it by saying, this is something that can be understood later. Because, well, wait a minute now. Marble, wearing clothes and garlands, person's pressing down on the floor, and what's going on? But with good association and a little introductory progress in bhakti, when they finally are introduced to the deity, something clicks. Wait a minute, I don't understand it all, but there's something going on here. So I generally explain in the beginning that bhakti is the topmost mysticism. There's a lot you're not going to understand at first. The same way I explained about Bhagavad Gita. Some of you here might have, when you started your bhakti at the loft, you might have heard me say this. Read Bhagavad Gita, turn the pages, go from beginning to end, and there'll be a lot that you are familiar with and a lot that you're not familiar with, but just keep on going to the end, and when you get to the end, you'll see it all comes together. I don't know how many times over the past 40 years I've said that. So similarly about the deities, just withhold your conceptions for now, and as you start to educate yourself about bhakti, things will become more clear. That's what I did. Yes?
Can you just elaborate on how we can develop deep compassion rather than doing a compassionate activity, because we want Krishna to be compassionate towards us?
What's wrong with that?
Rather than, because it's almost like doing a compassionate activity without compassion, because it's...
You got to start somewhere.
How do you actually develop that deep compassion for other people?
You got to beg for it. Bhakti is for beggars. You convince Mahaprabhu that you want to assist Nityananda and him in their mission. Be persistent. You know how to bug someone? You don't bug your husband, do you? Anyway, you have seen examples of someone bugging someone, right? Because you want something, right? You have to repeat the same thing, right? Like I said 2 days ago, is that how it works, Leela Maya?
Depends on who you're dealing with.
In any case, it's getting late. You have to be persistent about appealing to Krishna for compassion. Mahaprabhu wants this. So certainly, seek and you shall find. You'll get all the help you need. But you have to beg for it. Patita pavana hetu tava avatar. Sing the songs of Narottam Das Thakur, Bhakti Vinod. Parama Karuna Pahundwijana Nitai Gaura Chandra Sabha Avatar Sar Shiromani Kevala Ananda Kanda Bhaja Bhaja Bhai Chaitanya Nitai. My dear brother, just worship Nityananda Chaitanya Sabha Avatar. They're the essence of all avatars. Parama Karuna, extremely merciful. That's who you're dealing with. Surely you'll be successful. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.